in this particular scam, there is an overall picture in which Government of India and many states were directly involved. And the Government of India is directly responsible for this scam. So this is something which is very important. See, the whole intention is in India, the center, the states, all over, they're totally pro-corporate. They get donations from political parties, whether it's electoral bonds or otherwise, they get money. Once in 5 years, they get elected. These days, they buy legislators openly. And once this happens, sometimes, I get a doubt. India, does it have a democracy or is it corporatocracy, controlled by corporates? I think, there's something very dangerous in India. I still have faith in democracy. I still feel there can be a people's outcry against this. I am still an optimist that somewhere in the Parliament, this will be discussed. I still hope that a judicial commission of this will be forced on the government, will be forced. What happened in Kenya? He goes abroad. He projects some of these business houses, Adani's, Ambani's and all that, as the mascot of the strength of Indian business. Rightly or wrongly, whatever it is, he does it. Now, when in the case of one such corporate, a taint of the corporate's image appears somewhere, it actually indirectly reflects on the credibility of Indian business. So in a way, if one or two things like this happen, Indian business gets a bad name outside.
US indictment of Gautam Adani is much more serious than the Hindenburg report.
Absolutely.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Now, US indictment of business tycoon Gautam Adani by the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission has brought disrepute not only to the country, but its institutions and also its enforcement agencies. Now, there was a big ruckus today because the winter session started. There was a big ruckus in both houses of parliament where opposition pressed upon a JPC and a discussion on the Adani indictment. But both houses were adjourned, and the government, it seems, is just not ready for any kind of inquiry into this case. In fact, former Secretary to the Government of India, Mr. EAS Sarma, has written a letter to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, reminding her of her duties and also telling her where the country and its institutions are going wrong. And he has asked for a thorough probe into this incident. Joining me now this evening is Mr. EAS Sarma. Mr. Sarma, thank you so much for joining on HW News. It's wonderful to have you on the program. And I went through the letter which you had written to Madam Nirmala Sitharaman. But, today the starting of the winter session has been very, very discouraging. And of course, it was something which was expected. People never expect that, the Modi government, or for that matter, Nirmala Sitharaman, is going to answer on this US indictment of Gautam Adani. But what does this attitude by the government really show? That have they closed all the doors to any sort of inquiry into Gautam Adani's indictment?
One thing which we should notice that this issue of Adani indictment in the United States is being projected as a localized issue confined to one or two states where corruption was there. I think this is highly misleading and false, because in this particular scam, there is an overall picture in which Government of India and many states were directly involved. And the Government of India is directly responsible for this scam. So this is something which is very important. And we should take it very seriously, because the US court, the Security Exchange Commission are statutory authorities in the United States. Now, one could say, as somebody, a cheerleader for the NDA government said, this is an onslaught by a foreign agency on India's sovereignty. I mean, this is ridiculous, because, see, the same thing that FBI did, CBI in India could have done. The same thing that Security Exchange Commission did in the United States, SEBI could have done. The same thing that the court in the United States did, our courts could have done. Only thing is, about 1 year ago, almost 1 year ago, the reports of this investigation appeared in newspapers in the United States and India. And after all, SEBI could have contacted its counterpart, Security Exchange Commission, both are statutory authorities. And CBI could have contacted the FBI for all the details. I can tell you FBI has a lot of information on this, obviously. And CBI could have investigated and filed a case in Indian courts. So the basic thing is, it makes a mockery of India's institutions, their credibility. It makes a mockery of our own judicial system in a way, and our investigating agencies. I think this is something very, very important. And as I mentioned to you, there's a much larger picture actually. See, both Government of India and the states, for the last several years, they have been going all out to promote solar energy. See, solar energy, there are two ways of promoting. One is centralized plants, corporate plants, where you have one big plant and then through wires, you deliver electricity to consumers. The second is your decentralized solar energy, rooftops, solar irrigation pump sets, where the consumer will have this generation capacity and he can sell surplus energy to the grid and he can earn income. So the second alternative is really very, very beneficial to consumers. Now, in a centralized plant, solar plant, many people should know. I have seen people as if it's a boon to the states. See, the centralized solar plants operate at low capacity utilization rates, very, very low. The second thing is, from the plant to the consumer, there is a transmission system. You have to make very heavy investments on that. And there are losses, transmission losses, technical losses actually, almost about 15 to 16%. So when this particular electricity comes to the consumer, it becomes very expensive. So in a way, solar electricity, big plants are uneconomical. Now, instead of going in for these decentralized small systems, both Mr. Modi and the state chief ministers went all out to promote corporate solar plants. In a way, they handed over solar energy to Indian corporates, which is very, very unfortunate. This is where the trouble started. Now, the second thing, they know it's
it seems applied their mind before giving it and handing it over to the corporates.
Yeah, and one thing that happened is, because the uneconomic plants, the Government of India, especially the Ministry of Non-Conventional and Renewable Energy, and SECI started subsidizing them. See, subsidies come from taxpayers' money in the budget. They subsidized the Adani Group, almost about 700 crores rupees. And the Azure Group is an American company. They gave about 186 crores to make it economical, viable. Now, having done that, it was still uneconomical. Inherently, they're uneconomical. So what they did was they brought in the Solar Energy Corporation of India with a public sector undertaking. And Solar Energy Corporation of India became a broker. Very unfortunately, it became a broker to sell that uneconomic, highly expensive solar energy to consumers. Naturally, there will be a lot of consumer resistance because majority of Indian consumers cannot afford that kind of cost. So what they did was, the Ministry of Power stepped in, and they really started the whole thing by what is known as, they imposed a renewable energy obligation. That means the states must buy so much of solar energy, 10% or 15%. They imposed an obligation through a directive issued under Section 11 of the Electricity Supply Act illegally, because they don't have the authority to issue such directives. And I had written several times to the government saying this is illegal, don't do that, don't impose an obligation. After all, these are all corporate solar plants. Why should you impose an obligation on the state to buy only from corporates, which is not correct. But they went ahead. And after doing all this, when SECI, their power plants were SECI and Azure together, about 12 gigawatts, and it was 12,000 megawatts of power. Now that was very expensive. So they gave it to SEBI, and SECI, that is Solar Energy Corporation of India, should have said, no, this is very highly expensive and we cannot sell it to the consumers. But they had no consumer interest in the view. They were only interested in furthering the interests of the corporates. So what they did was they asked the states. Now here, naturally, the state chief ministers, the state discoms, they were not willing because they're very expensive. there is what is known as a merit order dispatch system in each electricity board. They buy electricity, whichever is the cheapest. So in a way, this deviates from that. So naturally, there will be a lot of resistance. So then Adani and company, according to the indictment, they stepped in and they started negotiating with the chief ministers. And the chief ministers, obviously there was some, easy way of bribing people in India this way. It was unfortunate. And the whole thing became corrupt. And the Andhra Pradesh government, other state governments probably, and the SEBI, Government of India, all of them conspired. I would use the word conspired.
No, and another thing, Mr. Sarma, sorry to interrupt you, but all this conspiracy couldn't have ever happened without the knowledge of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister.
Absolutely. I brought it to their notice several times. Please don't do this. Power Ministry, Finance Ministry, I wrote to them. In fact, I wrote a letter to Mr. Modi himself saying, don't go for corporate solar plants. Go for this decentralized plants. And I was advisor energy in the Planning Commission. I was Secretary of Power in Government of India. I felt this is not the way to go about. So after doing all this, the great hurry, SEBI succeeded. Gautam Adani succeeded in forcing states to sign power purchase agreements. Now, one important thing is they signed long-term power purchase agreements, 20 years. Now, in solar power, solar photoelectric electricity generation, the technology is changing very fast. The efficiencies are improving very fast. So you lock in a state group of consumers into high-cost electricity. And once you have got a plant, and for 20-year power purchase agreements, it becomes rigid. You can't even change it because the technology is.
You wrote a letter, like you said that you wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. You informed. You wrote a letter to Nirmala Sitharaman as well. You never got a response from their end?
Never, because they have no response. See, the whole intention is in India, the center, the states, all over, they're totally pro-corporate. They get donations from political parties, whether it's electoral bonds or otherwise, they get money. Once in 5 years, they get elected. These days, they buy legislators openly. And once this happens, sometimes, I get a doubt. India, does it have a democracy or is it corporatocracy, controlled by corporates? I think, there's something very dangerous in India. So all policies are tuned to only suit corporates.
So you mentioned a very important term, and I think we must emphasize on that. You said that India is no more a democracy. It looks like a corporatocracy.
Corporatocracy.
Yes, corporatocracy. But how would you elaborate on this, sir? If we are to say that it's not a democracy, but a democracy which is run only by the corporates?
Very simple. There used to be one Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, 1976, then in 2010 it was tightened. And under that, foreign contributions should not be taken by any political party or political candidate. But I found that both Congress and BJP were taking these donations. So I filed a case in the Delhi High Court in 2013, questioning this, saying they violated the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. I got a judgment in 2014 in my favor. And the Delhi High Court said within 6 months, prosecute both BJP and Congress. Unfortunately, they went to the Supreme Court in appeal, and I won the case in Supreme Court. So I wrote to them, I said, now at least you prosecute. You know what the Modi government did? Openly, without any, I would say, shame. They retrospectively amended the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act from 1976 to make it easy for them to take these donations. They were not enough. The greed for money, for electioneering is something where they went another step and they removed the cap on what corporates, private companies, donations. There is a cap on in the Companies Act. They removed that. Even that was not enough because they were avaricious. They wanted to get donations and then run elections in India. So they introduced this electoral bond scheme. Electoral bond scheme was held illegal by the Supreme Court. Now, unfortunately, Supreme Court should have taken it to its logical end. It did not. And the result is about 6,000 crores of electoral bond money was lying with BJP and they must have used it in the elections. It's a tainted money. Now, in every electoral bond case, there was extortion. There was open favors given. For example, Silkiara Tunnel, Chardham project in Uttarakhand, I think. There was an accident. They were supposed to, the contractor was supposed to provide an escape route for the workers. He did not because he wanted to maximize profits. And the result was about 48 odd workers were caught. And it was a terrible struggle for them. And the rat miners went and saved them ultimately. Now, till today, the government has not taken any action against the contractor. And the reason is the contractor has given them electoral bond money. There are many, many such cases. People who are accused of crime, they were given parliament seats, nominated for Rajya Sabha seats, because they gave electoral bonds money. I mean, this is the kind of democracy that we're in this country, and people should question it, in my view. A party may win elections, a party may lose elections. That's not the issue. India, the citizens are supreme. We, the people, under the constitution, there is no question of any political party dictating terms to people. People should question this. So that's where I say that, unfortunately, in India, I still remember Dr. Ambedkar, when he presented the constitution to the Constituent Assembly. He said, look, we are giving you a piece of paper, this constitution. Will it work? I'm not very sure. If good people work it, it becomes a good constitution. If bad people work it, it becomes a bad constitution. This is what exactly happened in India.
No, but Mr. Sarma, I'm because you spoke about corruption. Now look at what happened in Maharashtra elections. The votes have been bought. There's been a brazen use of money. Everyone is just talking about one model, and that is the Adani model of elections. Now, how on earth will the government of the day take action against Gautam Adani when he's funding them, when he is ensuring that they win the elections, whether it is compromising with the election commission, whether it is compromising with any other thing? It's an Adani who is running the elections. It's Adani who's running the country. So how on earth can we expect the opposition also to raise their voice? To what extent, to what level will they keep raising the voice when they're going to be unheard?
Some of these opposition parties have no right to question it, because they too collect money from corporates. See, it's not just Adani. There are many corporates who are running the government and elections. All their money goes into elections. And once these people get elected, our leaders, the corporates actually dictate policies. They have diluted the Forest Conservation Act, taking money from corporates. They have diluted the Mineral Development and Regulation Act. See, they're changing policies for the corporates, not for the citizen of India. So it's no longer, for the people, by the people. That kind of thing is not there at all. So this is where I think something very important. Now, in this particular case, SEBI, the case of SEBI. Now, SEBI had been conducting inquiries against Adani for the last 10 years. Till today, those investigations have not seen the light of the day. And this is admitted in the Parliament. The fact that the inquiry was there in 2018, it has been going on. That is one. And the second thing is, there are accusations against the SEBI chief. In fact, one of the accusations is that she has got some kind of an indirect link with Adani's. Now, what happened? The SEBI chief gave herself a clean sheet. Whereas, under the SEBI rules, there is a conflict of interest clause. And obviously, a SEBI chief cannot clear herself. And she is supposed to make some disclosures, not only to SEBI as a body, but SEBI chief is appointed. SEBI chief and members are appointed by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. The SEBI chief is supposed to make disclosures to Finance Ministry, and Finance Ministry is supposed to bring it to the notice of the Appointments Committee. That has not happened. And Ministry of Finance has got a responsibility under SEBI Act and SEBI rules to take action against SEBI members and chief. So I wrote to the Finance Minister some time ago saying, look, this is something on which you should act. You cannot, acquiesce when the SEBI chief gives herself a clean sheet. There was no response. So in my letter, I mentioned for the last several months, you have adopted a Sphinx-like attitude without any action at all against SEBI. So you lost your credibility. So the only way out now is to appoint an independent judicial commission, independent of the Modi government, independent of any other political system. And that is the only way we can achieve. And this is where I want a public discussion. In fact, discussion like this.
But how independent will that, Mr. Sarma? You were talking about an independent judicial commission. Now, there are always allegations that now the judiciary is also, has surrendered in a way, and it just does what the government wants it to do. So in that case, if there is a judicial commission, how independent will that judicial commission be? Are you guaranteed of the fact that if the judicial commission is formed, it's going to be very independent? It'll come out with an honest report on Adani? Or for that matter, even SEBI chief?
I'm an optimist. Frankly, I'm an optimist. I still have faith in the judiciary. in this country. I still have faith in democracy. I still feel there can be a people's outcry against this. I'm still an optimist that somewhere in the parliament this will be discussed. I still hope that a judicial commission of this will be forced on the government, will be forced. What happened in Kenya? The whole empire crumbled. One whistleblower, and then as a result of his outcry, people rose against the government, and the government, which took a very obstinate position in favor of Adani, one fine morning they came to the parliament and said sorry. Now, of course, Kenya is a country, probably we cannot compare ourselves to Kenya, but India is far too large a country. The democracy has such heavy stakes. People have stakes in democracy. So I personally believe that these things, once a discussion, the momentum is gained. See, for example, in Adani case, I wrote a number of Telugu letters to Chandrababu Naidu. Today I issued a letter. And many newspapers asked me to send copies and all that. And people have started discussing. Now, I requested Chandrababu Naidu to get an inquiry done into this. But not only that, I said even in his own previous term, 2014-19, there were many favors given to Adani. Even that should be investigated. So the question is, he will obviously resist. But then people will at least, question the whole thing. So I think this is something very important. I believe that public discussion is a very powerful tool to move governments, move leaders. Leaders cannot. Any leader who thinks that he can take the country for a ride, I think he has no future at all, according to me. He may survive for some time, but he may not survive for long. See, a leader who cares for corporates and a leader who ignores people's views, I don't think he will ever survive because he will not have a future. You can call it a curse, you can call it a wish, you can call it a hope, but that will happen.
So, so what you have said, and if you keep that in context with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he seems to be winning now. He's won Haryana, he's won Maharashtra, and now it seems it's just there's no looking back because the opposition looks completely momentumless. It seems listless at the moment with no narrative. They seem to have nothing under their belt. How will they move the people? What are they going to talk about when the institutions are not by their side, when the media is not by their side? How on earth is the opposition or anybody for that matter really wake up the people to know what the reality of the government is? A government which has closed all its doors. It is resistant to any sort of inquiry in such a big indictment of Gautam Adani.
I think, these are all temporary in my view. See, after all, BJP didn't do well in Karnataka. BJP didn't do well in Karnataka. They didn't do well in Kerala. South, for example, there's a lot of resistance. It's not as though one political party can get away with everything. There's a lot of resistance. So I personally believe that people may feel very comfortable winning elections, but that may not go on forever if they defy democratic norms where the constitution, the rule of law, that's very important. See, if you start diluting laws and all that, somewhere, I feel that judiciary will come in. Electoral bonds is a good case where Supreme Court held it illegal. Of course, I wish Supreme Court had gone all out and they had appointed a commission to investigate all the cases. I wish Supreme Court had done it. But I personally believe that one should not be pessimistic in this. I mean, I am personally, I am a part of people's movement in Andhra Pradesh. I take part in people's movements right from Srikakulam, everywhere. I'm in touch with the people and their pulse. So in a way, this is very important. I have seen people's movement succeeding. They may fail here and there, but they also succeed. So I am a great believer in that.
Mr. Sarma, but do you think that this US indictment of Gautam Adani is much more serious than the Hindenburg report?
Absolutely, because there are two important reasons. One is judicial is a judicial pronouncement. It cannot be taken lightly. And the United States, law takes its course, irrespective of political, contours and all that. The law takes its course. Now, the second thing is, see, wherever Mr. Modi goes, when he goes abroad, he projects some of these business houses, Adani's, Ambani's and all that, as the mascot of the strength of Indian business. Rightly or wrongly, whatever it is, he does it. Now, when in the case of one such corporate, a taint of the corporate's image appears somewhere, it actually indirectly reflects on the credibility of Indian business. So in a way, if one or two things like this happen, Indian business gets a bad name. outside. See, today, many investors in the United States are hesitating to raise money for some of these groups because they make false disclosures. See, SEBI, 1 year ago, when they came to know about this Adani investigation in the United States, they could have checked whether the Adani group was making disclosures. If they did not, I think they ought to have taken action. So I think, this is something where we are in a globalized environment, and it's not as though we can operate in isolation. So I feel that after all, if we're raising money, investments and all that, even American investors will stop investing in India. European investors, other investors probably will stop investing because they will say, see, they're all looking for not subsidies. There's a PLI scheme, production linked incentive scheme. Can you imagine government of India is giving 13,000 crore subsidy? It's an American company to set up a semiconductor plant in Gujarat. Why should taxpayers' money be given to a highly profitable industry? So that kind of thing, they're coming. But then if there is no rule of law, if a government doesn't respect the rule of law, even investors will hesitate, which is not a good thing for the country. So the first thing in India is to maintain the rule of law. That is fundamental to democracy. Predictability of policy.
No, but Mr. Sarma, you're right when you say that the rule of law is the same for everyone. But here you have a different rule for Mr. Gautam Adani. You have a different rule for BJP. You have a different rule for the opposition. But how hopeful are you towards the end? I'll ask you that. How hopeful are you that do you think that Adani still can get away? Because people still believe, and there is a lot of murmur in all sections of the society that tum log kuch bhi kaho, but Adani will get away. You may say whatever you want, but somehow Adani will work up his way, either with Donald Trump or Modi will try and save him, but he will have an exit door from this US indictment crisis.
Don't forget, Mr. Donald Trump has only 4-year term. He cannot contest again, unlike India. So America, there is only 2-year term rules. So he cannot be there after that. It's a temporary thing. The second thing is, even Adani or any other corporate group, they think that they can defy people's interests. Here, I did not mention earlier, the same Ministry of Power, the same Government of India, Ministry of Coal and Railways created an artificial coal crisis for the last 3-4 years. Artificial, purely artificial. Railway bottlenecks, all these things are man-made. Having done that, Ministry of Power issued a Section 11 Electricity Act directive, illegal directive to states. You must buy imported coal. And the moment they did it, all these companies, private companies have got overseas mines in Indonesia, coal mines. They started getting that coal, selling at astronomical prices. So as a result of Government of India's involvement, conspiracy, states were forced to buy this coal from Adani and Tatas and other people. And that coal being so expensive, the burden fell on the electricity consumers in India. This is another one, where the entire government seemed to be acting against the electricity consumers in India and acting in favor of some of these corporate bodies. So I personally feel I'm hopeful because I won a case in Delhi High Court on the foreign contribution regulation, and I went up to Supreme Court. Yes, that it was retrospectively amended. I challenged it in the court. Now, somewhere, I'm sure democracy will take care of these aberrations. These are all aberrations. Like, you're traveling in an aircraft and there's turbulence. When you're actually passing through turbulence, you think that you'll never come out of that. But after some time, it settles and the turbulence is over. Then you say, relief. I think that is exactly like that. These are all democratic turbulence in India. Probably we'll go through that, and ultimately India's democracy will survive, not the political leaders.
But who do you think, whose accountability rests as far as Adani's indictment is concerned? Where does the buck stop in this particular case?
Government of India is the starting point. I think they are the ringleader of the conspiracy, I would call it, in the whole thing. Then the states, then SEBI, CBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and other CBI, ED, CBDT, income tax. They're all responsible in India. And, I'm surprised.
But how do you hold the accountability? When you say that Government of India is a ringleader of this conspiracy, then where does the buck stop? Does the buck stop only with the Prime Minister?
Buck stops the people of India. Somewhere the democracy will assert itself. Rule of law will assert itself. Even judiciary will have to, ultimately obey the rule of law. Transparency. These are all important. No institution in India is above that. See, this is the beauty of our Indian constitution.
Absolutely.
And the strength of that. So I think we should really have hope. Let us repose our faith in the Constitution. Constitution is a savior. Let's hope so.
Right. On that positive note, thank you so much, Mr. Sarma, for joining us on HW News. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stay ahead with our cutting-edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.